Hi guys, sorry for the small delay. We've had a bit of a technical problem which we overcame in true turnaround style. So welcome to the pub. I'm absolutely delighted we can set this thing up, but even more delighted that you guys have joined us for this period of time. I think it's been a very worthwhile exercise. I think it's absolutely vital to get to grips with what's going on, and so that we're prepared. And we do this in a fairly open and honest, straightforward type of way, with a view to actually taking action rather than talking about it. And I think, where does our credibility come from? That comes from having turned around 200 companies and sharing some of the learnings from that, because it'd be stupid not to. And the other side of this, in terms of the capability we've developed, is very much enabling organisations to do it themselves, because they have got the right capabilities in-house, and we've got an approach which enables them to do it in pretty much a day. So we'll share some elements of that. The common theme in terms of where we are at the moment is around uncertainty and an extreme challenge, which I think anybody in their right mind would acknowledge. And we're trying to unravel that. Specifically, I'm delighted that Tim Sloggett's joining us today. Tim's a guy I've known for quite a while, actually. He's someone I know and trust from Smith and Williamson. And I think what we're going to talk about is collaboration with professional services. In other words, how do we realign what we do to suit organisations and do what's right for the company, which actually can sometimes mean what's not right for us too, which is an interesting challenge. And I think, just summarising, where we're at, what we've picked up, it's interesting and it's a bit tough to digest. And I think the word that I'd use is intimacy, and that's intimacy with each other, which is a bit odd in a business context. But that's the basis of profits. And I think it's also about rediscovering connection between us, and preserving that. Now, people have witnessed this when the shutdown first started, but it's important we don't miss it, because it's vital, I think, for businesses to survive. There have also been some major buying shifts around excessive consumption and other things which we'll touch on. And there's a real strong need to do the right thing, which is part of the reason why I'm delighted that Tim is joining us today. So I've added another thing as well, which I think is a consequence of the new now, which is a negative thing, which is worth acknowledging, which is a failure to take new action. So I think we've had a window and we've failed to take new action during this window, and we'll cover that off, and David McLean specifically will talk a bit about that. Anyway, so the format is I'm going to hand over to Tim in a minute, then I'll talk a bit, and then David McLean will talk a bit about the people side, and Mike Allen will be Mike Stewart has got the unenviable task of sort of finishing this discussion off. So anyway, without further ado, really look forward to what you've got to say, Tim, and sharing what we're doing in terms of providing a solution, taking that to market.
Thanks, Tom. So I've been attending these pubs for a while now. I'm watching with interest, so it's really great to be able to make a contribution today to the pub. So really appreciate being here. The key themes that I'm going to talk about today, which is very much in line with the things that Tom's just talked about, and the ongoing themes throughout the pub, are the need for businesses to take hard and fast actions, and the importance to collaborate to deliver the best solutions. Now, as a restructuring professional focused on trying to rescue businesses, one of the hardest things about my job is when businesses come to me, and it's just too late to do anything. And had they come to me just a few weeks earlier, then there would have been things that we could have done to rescue the business. And whilst on a macro level at the moment, I do think there are lots of positives out there, and there are clearly some green shoots, and there's clearly lots of winners in this situation. But obviously there's lots of losers as well. And I think the real crime here will be if good businesses fell where it could have been avoided. Now, my fear is that there are too many good businesses out there that are currently not seeking the right advice, and they could come unstuck in the relatively near future. So what's driving this fear? Some of you may recall Paul Kempster was on a couple of weeks ago, and he quoted some really useful and positive statistics. Now, one that jumped out at me was that 46,000 CBILS applications had been approved and loans issued, totaling £10.5 billion. And this has actually now gone up to 62,000 loans, totaling £13.7 billion. So clearly some really good, really good positives there around the level of funding that's gone into SMEs to support them get through COVID. Whilst now there is another side to these. Approximately 50% of CBILS applications have actually been rejected. And well, not necessarily been rejected, but haven't been currently approved. So whilst some of those might still be in progress and they're still going to work through the system, that's effectively 62,000 businesses out there at the moment that do not have the funding that they need. Many of these will be really good businesses, good, strong underlying businesses, and they may just not been able to meet the criteria. For example, they may have gone through a heavy investment program over previous years, and therefore they've got too much debt on the balance sheet, so they can't meet the debt serviceability requirements. And then on top of this, you've got some important milestones looming. So on 1st of October, creditors will again be able to take action to wind up a business. The furlough scheme will be coming to an end shortly after. And then in December, HMRC will again obtain preferential status, which means that there may be some challenges in businesses obtaining some funding. It may cause a bit of a squeeze around that, and also it may be more difficult to implement company voluntary arrangements. So that's just to name just a few of the challenges coming up. Now, if we take a look at the restructuring profession, there are approximately 1,700 licensed insolvency practitioners in the UK. However, not all of these are practicing. Some of them will only do personal insolvency. Some of these will be lawyers who don't take appointments and don't implement restructurings. So really there are approximately 150 to 200 insolvency practitioners in the top 10 accountancy firms. So let's say there are approximately 500 IPs out there that are good IPs and have the capability to implement rescue solutions. Now, being prudent, if you just take half of the 62,000 businesses that currently don't have the funding, that's 62 businesses per IP. And from talking to colleagues around the profession, it doesn't feel like IPs have 62 businesses talking to them at the moment. So it really does feel like there are a lot of businesses out there at the moment without the funding that they need, and who aren't seeking the advice that they need. And this does sound quite alarming, but I really do think, and I strongly believe, that there are some solutions for these businesses, providing that they take action now and seek the right advice. So what can we do about this? What can be done about how can we rescue these businesses? The new Corporate Insolvency and Governance Bill, or Act now, because it's come into force, does provide some really useful tools to help rescue businesses, but these are currently untested, and there's likely to be some practical issues and teething issues and challenges to work around. And absent of any further government funding or support packages, I think we're going to need a lot of creativity and as Tom touched on earlier, a lot of collaboration across the restructuring profession, across businesses, and across the stakeholders to deliver solutions. And I think the key focus to support businesses is going to be around buying the business more time, mitigating the funding requirement, then with the benefit of time and potentially a lower funding requirement, obtaining the funding, which all sort of create the platform to enable a business to drive a turnaround. So this is all about creating space for some quick new thinking, for some collaboration to develop a rescue plan, and in my experience, with some really careful management, there are lots of levers that can be pulled to extend that cash runway for businesses and give them that time and breathing space that they need. And in certain circumstances, we will, we do have a moratorium, a new moratorium, and this may help like I say, in certain circumstances to buy the business more time. Now, they won't be appropriate for all solutions, and there are a number of risks and uncertainties around how they're going to work in practice. They're untested. There are risks to the IP of implementing them. But in my view, as a restructuring professional, not having a go and trying to use these in the right time is a bit like having a fireman that's scared of heights. So we need to find a way to make these work where appropriate, and I've been sort of teaming up with Tom over recent weeks to try and work through ways that we might be able to work together and actually implement some of these. And then, look, with the benefit of more time, we can then start to try and pull some of those cash levers, start to drive some of these profit improvement initiatives. And then we've got some more potential formal rescue tools that we can use in our kit bag, such as the new restructuring plan, company voluntary arrangements, all sort of useful tools to reduce the level of funding that the business may need. And then that enables us to go back out to potential funders with a much better proposition and actually try and get them the funding that they need. So to implement these work streams, it takes a lot of, you've got to do this quickly, you've got to do this at pace. It takes an intense effort. It takes a huge amount of collaboration. There's some really, really careful, difficult discussions with stakeholders. They need really careful management through this process. And in situations like these, really every week does count. And just weeks can be the difference between creating options and finding a solution or just having nowhere to go. So to summarize, the key messages for me today really are, there are things that can be done to get these businesses through this crisis, but management teams need to act fast. We need to collaborate, and we really do need to think outside the box.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Really great summary. Thank you very much, Tim. I think it's very clear. A couple of observations and then a question. I think one of the challenges here for business owners is who should they turn to? If you look at, an IP is almost the last person you turn to. A bank is definitely the last person you turn to, despite the rhetoric, because banks very often just want their money back in difficult situations, which is understandable. And actually, I think it's about trying to provide the right sort of point of contact to show a genuine interest in actually saving the business, which then does full circle in terms of actually what's the right thing to do in these circumstances. And it's very much the moratorium. And the moratorium is a fairly light touch. It's intended to be light touch to support businesses and do the collaborative thing. But actually, for IPs, it's difficult to make money because it's you don't make as much fees out of a moratorium, and the risk is a little bit higher. So I think there's those sorts of challenges, and I think one of the challenges in this, which I'm going to talk a bit more about, is actually doing the right thing. What is the right thing to do? Which is something you mentioned very clearly up front, and Paul Kempster did as 2 out of quite a few people that we've had on the pub. So I guess the question is, what do you think that starting point should be? I mean, what should that landing? Who should they pick up the phone to? What should that person they speak to? What would they be called? Was that What are your thoughts in terms of the right place to pick up the phone to?
Yeah, I mean, look, insolvency practitioner is a scary word. And I think it's a very widely misunderstood word as well. Yeah. The Insolvency Act provides some really, really powerful tools to help rescue a business. And most of the IPs out there, certainly if you look at IPs in the top 10 firms, are about actually how do we rescue businesses. I get up out of bed in the morning to actually rescue a business. The last thing I want to do is put a company into liquidation. So there is a bit about that stigma, and I think I would just implore people to pick up the phone to an IP. That's got to be where we're heading at the moment in terms of some of the issues I talked around in October. There's no time for messing around here. No. This takes this takes hard action and fast.
Yeah.
So I think the first sort of protocol's got to be IPs.
Okay, I think, you know, even the discussion that you and I had yesterday, I think it's a good example of actually trying to conduct the discussion to understand where people are, because it's all very well saying IP is what's required, but actually very often people don't necessarily understand the circumstances they face, and or they might be making assumptions that, you know, such as funding, or, you know, when we get more funding or something, that somehow they'll get through this. So I think, you know, I think one of the challenges is to, you know, acknowledge people where they are, and actually, insolvency is part of it, but alongside a plan, you know, with a genuine interest to save the business. I think that's the challenge. But I think, yeah. Any other observations on that, Tim, in terms of us getting that right? What do you think the key element is?
I mean, you know, I say come to an IP first, but I would anticipate, you know, the likes of myself are going to be talking to you and working closely alongside you, like you say, to develop that plan. And it's about, you know, coming back to my point earlier, working together to initially buy the time, and then trying to develop that plan jointly. Yeah,
that's great. Fantastic. Thank you very much, Tim. That's a great contribution. So I'll add a few thoughts, and you're welcome to come back at me and ask me any awkward questions, as awkward as you like. So thank you for that. So I think what I'd like to sort of add is around the sort of leadership skills required to navigate these situations. A lot of talk around actually the good old leadership skills are okay to figure these situations out. I'd like to challenge that thinking a bit. So now people might make statements that COVID-19 is sorting the men from the boys, but actually on the assumption that actually the old leadership skills are okay, and it's just that, you know, you've either got men or boys, which is maybe a bit politically insensitive as well. But nonetheless, I think it's assuming there is a difference between men and boys. So I think that I read a statement today which is very left of field, which said we put all that energy into enabling each other, supporting each other, loving each other. It makes for a very happy life, right? And that's the sort of statement which I think in some ways captures, and it's a bit of an uncomfortable statement because it's a bit sort of, bit, you know, on the female sort of touchy-feely side, but I think it rather captures the challenge, the leadership challenge, and the sort of framework we need to create to enable businesses to survive. And the analogy I use in terms of encompassing that is the jazz band, which is a group of people which are very closely knit, very intimate relationships, and they have no music. They play based on the customers. They're also servants, you know, of that business or of that tune. So they're not playing for themselves. They're playing for the customers in a fairly selfless way. And they play for as long as required. They have no particular right to sort of play their music till, you know, the audience gets fed up with it. I think some of the other elements of sort of leadership capabilities are things like forgiveness and gratitude. Even a business I was talking to this morning, there was a really difficult relationship between two directors, and the dialogue and managing relationships at the moment is very, very difficult. And forgiveness and gratitude are two critical skills that no one really talks about, but without which you can get yourself in real trouble. Being allowed to be yourself is very important. And, you know, this thing around, you know, profit and relationships versus growth and domination, you know, fighting is very costly as a rule. And actually collaboration, I think, is probably the way forwards. And you can see some of the global aspects in terms of the way China obviously fights in business, totally different framework versus the more established, well, actually Chinese are very established as business people, but completely different. So I think the other element of this is actually around speed. So it's about getting to situations very fast. So the program that you and I are talking about is getting to viability or demonstrating viability in one day, which you simply cannot do as an IP, or even as what I do. We need to work together to do that. And we need a broader team to do that. And it's really with with no right to exist. So I think the assumption is that somehow a lot of business owners assume that they have a right to exist. And I think that is a pretty bad starting point and slightly unhealthy. And the whole crux of this is taking immediate action. So the other aspect is teamwork. So it's about moving on all fronts. And this is actually very imperfect. And I think the analogy I'd use is rather Trump-like. Yeah. So there are lots of snakes in the grass criticising people like Trump who step out and take action. But actually, that's what action looks like. It's very rare. If you sit around and try to take perfect action, then you'll never do anything. So it's about finding the right balance there. I think it's about getting the governance right in businesses and getting the team reviews right, which gives rise to predictable cash. And this whole thing about working from home is interesting because social isolation and loneliness are actually more dangerous than smoking. I think the challenge then is how much trust we give people at home to actually replace that social aspect in the workplace. And actually, I've never been particularly big on social aspects in the workplace, but actually I think it's a lot better to have people around you than not have people around you, even if they aggravate you, or then you might not want to go to the pub with them, although we are all at the pub. So joking aside, I think it's about informal discussions, and I think that's the way you identify risk. So if you're building an aircraft which can drop out the sky, or a car which can kill people, how are you going to anticipate risk if you're all dotted all over the place? And actually, what does it look like to engage with these organisations? So I think practically there's some other pitfalls as well in trying to get this right, in terms of joint working between you and I, that around getting the funding right, Tim. So the implications of taking on debt on the balance sheet from a solvency perspective, it might improve your cash position, but it doesn't improve your balance sheet. And people really don't understand that. And asset-based lending in a downturn can cause all kinds of problems and actually really squander profit. So some really practical aspects that people are very unfamiliar with. And it's also about getting the detailed and top-level plan right to actually create predictable cash and actually delegate things to manage risk. So I think the challenge as well is actually to resolve all of the issues, right? All of the issues. And actually, if you get a team of people and say, right, okay, I'd like you to fix all of the issues, there's very little stopping us from taking that action now, apart from all the stuff and fear that's going on in our heads. But if we don't resolve those issues, when will we? We know what they are. The challenges haven't got the courage to overcome our fear to do that. So there's a few psychological banana skins as well around. People might say, well, my leadership skills are okay, or as I said before, I'm good at that, which creates stasis. And it's really important we take a new perspective. So I talked about that sort of fluffy statement originally. It's actually, what is the new perspective we need to take to actually drive new actions? And, leaders that sort of do things and make decisions by themselves never did work. And I think it's even now more important when we're running the Winning Thinking program to actually delegate and get that ownership to drive self-realized actions from a different perspective at individual level. So this transformation happens across the whole team. So these are the things I think which really matter. I think the financial model as well has got to be able to weather the downside, because most business models are focused on managing the upside, and when in fact actually managing the downside in these situations is critical to survive. So cutting to the chase, I think there's two specific things which we've picked up recently. One is around tech funding. So the mantra in tech businesses is around raising more and more money rather than addressing the current issue. And quite a few of the discussions we've been having recently around, I want to raise more money, rather than actually, there are a couple of businesses we've spoken to where actually they've got cash points. They can pretty much win the lottery on a daily basis by getting the operational side and the product launch right. Rather than that, they're just waiting to squander and burn more cash, which is just ridiculous. And I think when I think back to when I did startups, I always considered, yes, there is a cost to starting a business, but beyond which you've then got to make money, rather than endlessly justifying raising more money to lose more money. So I think there comes a point in a business journey which should be quite early and a lot earlier to justify, their existence in the tech sort of space. I think as well and that thing around funding, raising Series A, Series B actually deletes and distorts the current actions. The second thing I think is around the doing the right thing. So I think there are, at business level, we talk about skills, but it's difficult to do the right thing, because in this circumstance, it's very easy to try and make money. So if you're given the option A and option B to make money, and there's been a couple of situations where we've been involved with people that I know and trust who are sort of taking shortcuts to make money, when in fact it's the wrong thing to do for the business. So that's very tempting. And the other side of this, I just add to what you just said, Tim, in terms of our collaboration, you actually need to set this out in an agreement, because this is actually a way of working in terms of delivering a non-proprietary solution in these situations, which are extremely difficult. And you need to make this clear to team members in terms of actually us working as a unit for the joint benefit of the company, which sometimes might mean not for the benefit of ourselves, which is exactly what Companies Act 2006 says, and other stuff that other people don't read until things become critical. But actually, this is actually the sort of leadership skill I think that needs looking at and challenging, and the sort of crux of the way we might work to get some of this delivery correct. So, any thoughts on that, Tim? Anything you'd like to challenge or disagree with? You're very welcome to disagree with anything I said.
No, I don't disagree with any of that. I think that's spot on. I think one of the things that that kind of jumped out for me is you said something about around leadership and around people think they're good leaders or think their leadership is okay.
Yeah.
I mean, you know, these situations. Well, the pandemic that we're in now is uncharted waters.
Yeah.
You know, not only that, just, you know, pandemic aside, when a business is in a stressed situation, this is a completely new scenario for the majority of leaders. They won't have been here. They won't have been here before, and you know, there's no shame in recognizing where you haven't been somewhere.
Yeah.
And that actually it just takes a completely different mindset, and a completely different way of thinking when you're in these scenarios. You know, and like you say, collaboration, team working, different ideas and experience of being actually in these situations. Yeah.
I think what amazes me, but I talked a bit about this yesterday, is to meet people where they are, which is, I think, the unbelievable thing, which for me personally, is that people don't see these situations, Tim, or they'll be saying when this, that and the other happens, and they're obfuscating taking action, or they might think the government's going to pay their bills till the cows come home or something, some assumption like that which prevents them taking action. So I think actually they don't see these situations, which is the reason why I established the pub with my great team to try and communicate this and try and drive some action around it, because it's a truly extraordinary situation. But I agree, having seen that, I'd also add that actually I think these are the skills that we should have adopted in the first place as executives, because it's what we should be doing anyway, really. These are the sorts of things I think we should be aware of these situations, and we should know how to cope with it.
I mean, the dichotomy you have, though, is that, you know, good entrepreneurs by their very nature are often very, very positive people, and yes, positivity breeds success.
Yeah. So,
you know, the downside of that is you often have that positivity can sometimes, you know, put some blinkers on around certain areas.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that, the good, I mean, even the word good entrepreneur implies stasis, which is the danger of that is pride and hubris. And, you know, there's a lot of, anyway, yeah, you're absolutely right, Tim. I think that's absolutely right. So great. David McLean, over to you, sir. Would like to add your thoughts, and we'll come on to the questions at the
yeah,
audience.
Absolutely. And just in that point as well, in terms of people, subjectively or objectively, what are we looking at? How are you seeing the point that you're looking at? It's a lot easier for us, whoever it is, from the outside looking in, objectively, but when you're involved in it subjectively, it's a whole different ballgame. Mainly, well, many reasons, but emotions are one of the main reasons there. And I'll talk a little bit more about that, but yeah, that's why, because sometimes people are like, well, I can't see it. I'm an intelligent man or woman, so things must be okay. But to be able to have an objective view outside in, along with experience that we've all got, it really does help a huge amount.
Yeah.
So, and also, Tom, you asked me just to talk a little bit about the ability to take imperfect actions. And I believe that everybody's got the ability to be able to take them, but there's something that's stopping people, of course. And what is an imperfect action? It's just about getting on and doing things, getting on with something, not trying to get it right, not trying to make sure it's 100% before you're doing it. As Tim's mentioned often here, which is a really good point, there is a time aspect to this, and time is running out. So it's tremendously important just to get on with whatever it is. And there's a bit of a sliding scale to the reasons why this isn't happening. And I believe that the majority of people are starting to move up the scale, actually, from procrastination, which can be, well, I'm sure the government will get it sorted. We're okay because we've got 60 days of cash left, or whatever it is. You know, we've got good people, all these different generalizations that you know about, Tom, and that we all know about. From that procrastination all the way up to crippling fear. And also, what I really like the point you made, Tim, that there's no shame in this. There's this often male, often female, but particularly male 40, 50 years older. It's male bravado. There's some sort of element of failure involved here just because things that have happened often out with your control. There's absolutely no shame whatsoever. But crippling fear will bring on shame. It will bring on these feelings onto you and will not allow you to naturally move forward so quickly as you would do. So hopefully by us being here and other people, of course, giving you that understanding that it's a very normal, natural response. I learned this in my training as a psychotherapist years and years ago. It's an evolutionary response. There's absolutely no need to worry about that in that sense. You're not losing face, so to speak. So yeah, really important. And also just sort of slide tracking, but in the same sort of point that you were asking me about the personal observations, because we as a Winning Thinking team are going through the Winning Thinking programme again, just to make sure that we're up to date and making sure that we are bringing any of our own personal observations into it. And it ties in well with the question that we're doing at the moment in terms of achieving breakthrough. Obviously, that's what we want to do. We want to achieve breakthrough with any of the listeners and watchers here and anyone else that you might know. And the main point that came up for me personally was limiting beliefs and how that holds people back. The fear, yes, all these different aspects, 100%, the shame that's brought along that, which there doesn't need to be, of course, but that perception of shame, but also the limiting beliefs. Not believing that you can't necessarily get out of this or you can't move forward is a real key point as well. And finally, I'd just like to bring up that point that you made, Tim, as well, in terms of buying more time. You certainly know your business a lot better than I do, but in terms of the people aspect, which is what floats my boat and lights my fire, in terms of buying more time and what can we do with the people in that particular point. Because as we know, it's the people that are running the business, it's the people that are making the decisions, it's the people that are not making the decisions. And what's absolutely key is that we need to help each other change your behaviour. Yeah. We need to be able to recognise what behaviours are not working and where to change them. And also to boost the confidence as well. Kind of sits in well with that shame aspect. Yeah. And that you're not a failure and that most of the time, the reason why the businesses are in the position they're in is because of the pandemic. And of course, some businesses were struggling anyway. But really getting that point across is tremendously important. Helping people to understand where they are psychologically is hugely important. And taking this aspect of shame, I keep using the word, it's a really good one, the aspect of fear away from it through knowledge and based on understanding, support and just helping people to see through to get the way forward. Yeah. So that's my
fantastic. Thank you very much, Dave. I think you started off, I just challenged some of what you just said, but I think you started off by saying that it's okay to look from the outside, the challenges, I think, with what set of glasses. And I think some of the things you talked about around shame, the strange thing about that is counterintuitive, where it's actually okay not to know. And actually that's a good place to be. Yeah. It's probably the most realistic place to be. So that's okay rather than, not okay. I think that then ties in with pride because that's the antithesis of that. And it's about recognizing these things. And I think the shame is also around you versus the situation. We can find ourselves, it's not that David is no good, which is a shameful statement. It's actually saying your situation, David, is difficult, or using the appropriate words, which alleviates that label, which is what shame's based upon. Yeah. I think the second thing in terms of limiting beliefs as well, is something that Jordan Peterson talks about around victimhood. He says the worst possible situation is victimhood, where people start feeling sorry for themselves. It's about sort of blaming, and that manifests itself of blaming COVID-19. If only this happened, or this hadn't happened, and poor old me, that is disastrous. And so he describes that as being the very, very worst state. So I challenge some of the, no, it's actually the glasses. So I think that's one of the things we're particularly interested in, I think, in terms of, sharing that knowledge to actually, rather than assume that people get what we're talking about, to actually share that and appreciate that and experience that for themselves, David.
No, absolutely. And shame is a perception. That's all it is. If you've got a fantastically running business and then COVID flipping takes the feet from under you, and then you feel shameful for it, which there'll be a lot of people that do, that's a perception. That's completely wrong.
Yeah.
And there's absolutely no need for that. But there'll still be a huge amount of people will be feeling that shame.
Yeah.
And victim, I completely understand. Most people think victims are the poor men and women that are sitting on the street homeless. We see them as obvious victims. But actually, victims go all the way through the scalings completely. And if you're ever at that stage, exactly as you say, well, oh no, this, why me or anything, then you're in that same ballpark. Not the same as the person lying in the street, but you're in that exact same ballpark. So I completely agree with you there.
Yeah, fantastic. Yeah, great. So anyway, great. Thank you very much. Really edgy, provocative dialogue, which is where the money is, frankly. So
exactly.
Great. So David, in terms of questions, what have you got in terms of questions, please?
Sure, we've got some good questions here. First one for you, Tim, please, is from Andrew Pepper. Tim, are you or are your firm actively taking a monitor role? Personally, not seen many people doing it or saying they will do it.
So at the moment, I'm not aware of any active monitoring role in the firm. And in fact, I'm only aware of one that's actually, I don't know whether it started yet, but I'm only aware of one actually, in the restructuring profession at all. And to be fair, I think a lot of that is probably the fact that there is currently a stay on winding up petitions until the 30th of September. So, at the current time, whilst creditors can't take action against the company, the need for a moratorium is probably less obvious. And I mean, you're absolutely right. A lot of I have even heard of IPs in the market saying that they are not going to do moratoriums. Like I said before, I think that's a bit like a fireman being scared of heights. I think as a profession we need to find a way to do these in the right situations. The tool has been given to us for a reason. The tool has been given to us with the spirit of rescuing businesses, and we need to use them accordingly, I think.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I think I just add one thing with that. I think we've actually had 6 months worth of moratorium. So why is another 20 days going to make any sodding difference? That's what worries me. By the time the winding up petitions come in, that's always an interesting type of scenario. So it's, I think, but great, Andrew, fantastic question. Good job.
Lovely. And a question from Nick Brown. I'll pose this to you, Tim, first. I think maybe you might have something to say as well, Tom, or not. But and we've partially answered this. But why do you think it is that people don't contact IPs until it is too late? It makes sense, manage downside risk, and yet people don't. I'm not convinced that IPs have the skills to operate in the prevention market. Certainly, they don't usually communicate this. Discuss.
God, we could be here all day discussing that, I think. I mean, there are so many dynamics around that. I touched on earlier that insolvency practitioners is a scary word for many, and I think probably a misunderstood word in some circumstances. That I'm not saying every IP out there, in all industries, whatever the industry, you will have good operators and not as good operators. But certainly the pool of people that I choose to align myself with are certainly very much rescue focused. So I think there's a bit about that kind of everyone hates cyclists because there's a few bad ones. so there's a bit around that, and then you open up a whole deep psychological aspect, which has been touched on today by both David and Tom. Like I said before, entrepreneurs are by their nature very, very positive people, very proud, and taking that step to seek advice can be a really, really, really difficult step.
Yeah.
Especially when there's a bit of stigma around the person that you're going to be seeking advice from. Yeah.
I'd just add, I think, to be honest, I don't think that until the moratorium cropped up, they were the right people to talk about in this environment either. If you think about it, Tim, if your business was in trouble, there's a legal responsibility to also follow the advice of an IP. You have to dodgy territory if you take advice and you don't follow it. So I think there's a whole raft of implications. It's about trying to find the right place. Who do you pick up the phone to? I mean, I think the other challenge with it is actually understanding the circumstances, which is what we talked about before. Because I think IPs do tend to talk about a whole raft of different things that most business owners technically don't understand. So I think there's a lot of fear associated with it as well. But that's why I think, joining forces is absolutely critical, and collaboration is critical, Tim, because we're both part of the same solution and we need to work together. And I think we demonstrated that quite well yesterday in terms of how to try and get that right.
Absolutely.
Brilliant. It's a big decision, isn't it? It takes courage.
Yeah.
So, Ton, question for you, Tim, similar, but how can we get the business leaders to ask for help in time, as it's almost like a rabbit caught in headlamps?
If I had, I mean, that is the that is utopia, being able to get business leaders to seek advice. And really, that's the whole crux of my message today. How do you get that out there? Really don't know. Really don't know. If I'm honest.
Communication, continuous communication. What you're doing, Tim.
I think it's a heart thing. I think it's about being genuinely interested in supporting businesses. Genuinely showing a genuine interest. I don't think from the outside it comes across like that, personally.
Okay, thank you. Another question from Andrew Pepper. When a bank rejects a C-bill, what does the bank do? The company has to admit it needs the money. With this on file, do we know what the bank's process is?
I think that'll be different. If I'm honest, I don't know. I haven't had a great deal of access to it. I know that in certain circumstances they are getting their internal turnaround and restructuring teams involved. I have been involved in some situations where the banks engaged me to advise on a situation where they've rejected C-bills. But I mean, like I said, there are 62,000 businesses out there that currently don't that have either been rejected or their applications still in progress, and I don't see 62,000 businesses out there being advised or being referred anywhere else. So, really good question, and no, I just don't have the visibility on that at the moment. I suspect it'd be different on a bank by bank basis.
Sure. And the final question final point from Ton, which sounds pretty good to me. Should we not rebrand IP into RP, rescue practice? Would that get rid of the stigma?
I'm all for that. Absolutely.
It sounds about right, doesn't it?
Absolutely. That would be brilliant.
I think it's also about having the skills, Tom, as well, to be able to fix the problem in the way we're talking about. Because restructuring is part of it, but it's also, all of the other things we've talked about today, and trying to get that right. I think that in a turnaround, you do need a different skill set, and it's not just the things you learn in an MBA. That's why the winning thinking aspect, the psychology aspect that David and I have been talking about, and Mike has been through the process, is so critical.
That's all the questions.
Great. Thanks very much, guys, for your questions. Fantastic challenge. it's got, I think some people underestimate how intimidating it can be to face some of these questions. Quite difficult. Thanks so much for that. Really, really good stuff. So, Mike, you've been very well behaved. Saying very little, but no marks for that, I can assure you. So over to you to summarise, please.
Thank you, Tom. I've been sitting here trying to think of the most effective way to summarise this very, very interesting discussion. But first of all, thanks very much to Tim. And I think the point that really came home strongly was most business people have not been in this position, and this is totally new. A new mindset is needed, and a new way of dealing with the challenges. And Tim also spoke about the fact that people frequently have these blind spots that make it difficult for them to conceive of a new plan. But what I really liked, Tim, is that you said, there are solutions, and that's very, very true. There are solutions. You emphasized the importance of acting fast. You emphasized the importance of collaborating across quite a wide field to get the right solutions for your business. And you also highlighted this issue of thinking outside the box. Tom came in and he spoke about the importance of relationships. There's that lovely analogy of the jazz band, and how do we get really strong relationships in these organizations that we're trying to rescue? How do we achieve positive collaboration and taking immediate action? And taking immediate action presupposes the existence of a good plan, a plan capable of immediate implementation, capable of being understood by all involved. And so Tom then rounded that section off by talking about this issue of delegation and empowerment, the courage to take really big steps in changing your product mix or whatever it is, and the need to focus on the company and its people rather than all of these other players around it. Then finally David came in and he spoke about this issue of action and how we shouldn't be afraid of taking imperfect action. He spoke about the issue of shame. And I've certainly experienced managers or directors of business going through that process. We cocked up here. There's no shame in this. This is a serious situation. Limiting beliefs. What can we do with the skills, with the core business that we have? There's surprisingly a lot of options when you start looking at it with a new set of spectacles, as Tom pointed out. So we also need to focus on how we manage the psychology of people, how we develop the people in this situation, and get them to think that they can win, get them to believe that they can win, that they're not on their own out there. Tim, thank you very much for an outstanding session. I really, really enjoyed that, and you touched on issues that are very real at the moment.
Yeah, fantastic.
Yeah,
Mike, you're an exceptional leader yourself, so I'd like to acknowledge that. Extraordinary, great summary. Thank you very much for that. We've got a huge amount of experience in these situations. I'd just like to add a couple of points just that come to mind. I think the moratorium provides a unique opportunity to put the company first without burdening it with too much fees, and that is unique because one of the reasons why IPs are not engaged, I think, is because that historically the process has been too expensive and onerous. I think we need to create a safe place to land so business owners feel welcome and we're actually putting them first, which comes back to putting the company first and the survival of the company first. I think it's then back getting to cash. Cash creates space, it creates credibility, then you can have discussions. But everything that we've ever done, we've actually run quite a few insolvencies, pre-insolvency, which is technically the most difficult work to do without actually a moratorium. But we never do that without an IP. So we work very, very closely, Tim, on that. So the IP's role is critical to get the advice, not just on insolvency, but also company law. I think that then comes on to the moratorium, which is about doing the right thing. I do think the moratorium is the right thing to do. But I think the last point I'd make is actually don't underestimate the complexity and the framework required to do this, because, you know, we've talked about that, and I've talked about this with David and Mike, which is a bit of a challenge, you know, in terms of getting that framework right, because it's not to be underestimated, because it's very easy to come unstuck and switch from putting the company first to proprietary interests. And then some critical aspects that a lot of even the best people don't understand. So, but I'd really like to thank you, Tim, for your contribution today. It's been fantastically straightforward and clear. Let's do some great work together. And again, just calling out the rest of the audience as well. If any other opportunities come to mind, let's work together and collaborate more broadly on this to bring this to market, because we've all got a genuine interest in supporting businesses. So, thank you very much for your proactive contributions.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks. Great to be here.
Yeah. Cheers. Cheers.